get the direct disadvantage of everything that was happening. We clearly knew our place. When they talk about our place, we knew our place, but they made it seem like it was okay because we didn't need to go to their place because we had our own place. Now, all the women were great cooks. The men turned out to be good cooks. So we didn't have to worry about going to a restaurant. Why go to a restaurant when you can have a picnic on your front porch with the best food around?
Yeah. Were there some issues with voting with your grandmother and family? Can you talk about that?
Yes. My grandmother decided at some point that she wanted to vote. And in doing so, she and a bunch of people went down to the courthouse to vote. At that particular day, they only took 2 people into the courthouse. And then the next day, they walked down to vote because they were walking. Because many times you couldn't afford to ride the bus because you needed your money for food and other things. So they would walk down to the courthouse. This another day they walked down and they let no one in to vote. Okay, that particular day. And they continued to do this until at some point everyone in that little group voted, because my grandmother and my mom, as well as other family members, were very civil-minded, and they all became voters. And my uncles, now as they got older, they became part of the court system. They would go down to court every single day when they retired and sit and listen to the cases, and they become very friendly with the judges, okay, down there, and they've gotten lots of write-ups in the local paper about their civic behavior.
Now, you had one uncle that went to Baltimore.
Oh, yes. And an uncle who went to Baltimore to find a better job.
And what time frame do you think this was?
This was probably mid-50s, because I remember I was still living in the big house at that time. So it was probably in the 50s. And he went to get a better job. There were not a lot of jobs there, as you can imagine, for African-American men in the neighborhoods. And he had just gotten married. And he went on to Baltimore. And he ended up getting beat and killed, okay, in Baltimore as a result of being there. And the story was he was in the wrong neighborhood. And we always thought of Baltimore as a really bad, bad place.
Even though it's considered the
North,
North,
right? Even though it's considered the North. He went up north. That was, I remember now, he was going up north, and we thought that was the greatest thing in the world, was he was going up north. He was going to make lots of money, okay, and come back and move his family out and get their own home. And, of course, that never happened, okay, at all.
There was another incident of in a cemetery. Can you talk about that?
Yes. My brothers went to the African American cemetery there, which was actually not too far from the church where we worshipped at. And it was one of those things we did. We went and played in the cemetery. We didn't see any big thing wrong with it. And he went one time, he found a person there that had been hung in the cemetery. So we were not allowed to go back to the cemetery at all, okay, to play or anything. And we still have, the cemetery still exists, and we still have family members buried, okay, in the cemetery today.
And this was an African-American male?
This was African-American male, yes. Yes.
So we assume this is part of mob violence, or?
Absolutely correct. That's exactly what we assumed. As we got older, we kind of understood what that was all about.
Yeah. Let's talk about your high school, because that's really where your activism started. Let's talk about high school. High
school was really, I think I was beginning to really recognize how wrong things were at that point. And I'm not sure if this was a community organizer that came, but I remember a young older man, okay, came to the high school, I.C. Norcom High School, and he would stand by the trees after school, and all of us activists, rebel rousers, okay, would run over, okay, to him at the end of school, and he would talk about the wrongness of the laws. You know, you should be able to go eat where you want to eat, and don't you want to go and eat in a restaurant, and don't you want to go to Woolworths? And of course, we all said, oh yeah, we heard they had great drinks, and we had a soda fountain there, and we would love to go to the store there. And so,
because you couldn't even go in the
you couldn't go in the Woolworths, you could not go in the store, and it was part of a shopping center, and it was literally right across the street from our high school. and you could not go in. I mean, if you were seen crossing the street, people going, "Where are you going to cross the street for? You know you can't go over there." And so it was really a time when we were just not allowed in the shopping center, or certainly not in the Woolworths at all. And we had heard about some of the things that were happening in Greensboro and some of those other places, and never thought little old Portsmouth would be the center for some of the rebel rousing that was going on at the time. So we decided, yes, we would go over there. Yes, we wanted to go. All those who volunteered met him at the tree and after school. And he talked to us about what non-resistant meant. And he said, I only want people who can go that will not say anything, will not do anything, will sit and take whatever. And he explained to us, they're going to call you names, they're going to punch you, they're going to spit on you, and you just cannot do anything. That's why it's called mass resistance. And you just cannot act. And so I thought I was brave enough to do that and decided, okay, let me go try this. And so we marched from IC Norcom across the street, probably 30 of us, I imagine is what it was at the time, all young high school students, full of energy, full of vigor, ready to do something. We didn't know it was going to be exciting or history making. We just thought we were ready to do something different. And we walked across the street and went into the store, and everything just stood still. I mean, you can imagine 30 people, African-American young people, walking into a store where they were not allowed, all whites being there. Just a huge silence. And we walked up to the counter, and there were a few seats at the counter, so we took turns sitting in those seats. And what happened was exactly what the young man told us was going to happen. We got spat on, we got jostled around, we got pushed, we got called the most vile names you could ever imagine anybody calling anybody in their whole entire life. As my mom would say, they called you everything but a child of God. Okay, and this was just continuously for the whole time. Most of them were adults. After we went back 2 or 3 times, some of the high school white kids came over and continued to do the same thing. Because we went several times, we just didn't go one time. We went several times.
What was the outcome of that? Did they finally let you all in?
Outcome of that was at one point there were police standing around, because they did call the police about the second time. And eventually we could go to the store and sit and eat, but we were told never to go by ourselves and not to stay very long. And then of course Woolworths shut down.
As a lot of the institutions.
As a lot of the institutions did. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So what was your academic career in high school, and how were the conditions of your high school?
High school was really interesting for me because some way I picked up this rebellious spirit, and it stayed with me all during high school. I was told by the counselors there I could only be a nurse, a teacher, or a secretary. Those were my 3 career choices. And I decided, I think at some point, I didn't want to be any of that, so I was going to be a rebel and be none of those. I didn't know what I was going to be, but I knew I wasn't going to be any of those. And I remember she sent me to the typing lab to learn how to type because I'd be a secretary. And the first day in the lab, I broke the typewriter. So they sent me to the office. So I spent a lot of time, in the principal's office. And the fun thing I remember that made it great for me to go to the office was I used to run the ditto machine that no one liked, the purple machine that no one liked to run. So the secretaries were happy to see me come in as I was getting our detention, because they knew they had someone to run the ditto machine for them. So it was a real rebel cause because I knew I wanted to be something. And I didn't do well in high school because of this rebel spirit of mine. And when I think that the only reason IC Norcom let me graduate was because, one, they felt sorry for me. I had aunts that were teachers, and the principal knew them, and they did not want me to return anymore to high school. So they allowed me to graduate. So I'm an official graduate of IC Norcom High School, which is absolutely wonderful. And I told my parents that summer I was going off to Washington, D.C. to make my fortune. And my mom kept saying, no, you're not going. You're not going to go by yourself. We got to find you someone to go with. But I was 18. I wanted to go to D.C., get rich, make my fortune, come north. Okay, didn't want to go to Baltimore, but I wanted to come north. And so my mom had a good friend, Dr. Ethelyn Strong, who was a professor at Norfolk State. And she said, well, I'm going to Catholic University to finish my doctorate degree. Why don't you come go with me and my family? A great opportunity. So I became part of her family. We trekked up to Washington, D.C. I lived with her in her house, and I could not find a job. And her goal, her objective in her house was you either worked or you went to school. Her kids went to school, she went to school. I couldn't find a job.
So what year did you graduate high school?
I graduated from high school in 1964.
Okay.
So this was 64.
Okay.
So I ended up working in the house for her. So I became like her housemaid in the house for the rest of the summer because I couldn't find a job. And she did not believe in laziness. You just weren't going to lay around and read all day. Okay. And so when it was time to come back to the area, she asked me what was I doing. I said, I'm staying in Washington. I'm making my fortune. You know, she said, but you don't have a job. But I know I'm going to get one in September. I know I'm going to get a job in September. She said, no, you're not. You're going to go to Norfolk State. I said, I hadn't applied to Norfolk State. I was not college material. And all she said, you're going to Norfolk State. So I came back to the city. She got me an appointment with our Dr. Brooks, who was president of Norfolk State at the time. She dragged me into his office. I sat in his office. He gave me an application for admissions, which I filled out right there on the spot. I don't think that happened often, okay? And I said, I don't have any money. He said, go down to financial aid, they're going to give some money.